the best nutrition is actually quite affordable and accessible. Digestion is weakened in postpartum, and the digestive force or energy, or what's known as the fire in Ayurveda, is very low. The main things to avoid in postpartum are cold, raw foods. I think it's really great to honour the craving somewhat, but see if it can be adapted to postpartum. I think it's really important to remember that the first 6 weeks of postpartum actually goes by very quickly.
Welcome back to the Postpartum Prep Podcast. My name is Ceridwen. I'm your podcast host and your guide to preparing for a smoother start to life with your new baby. Here on the Postpartum Prep Podcast, we talk about all things life after birth. We talk about feeding, we talk about sleep, postpartum recovery, mental health, and so much more. Today we have Carla from Carla Sage Birthwork here to talk to us about nutrition for postpartum healing and energy. We're doing a Q&A today, so we have some of your real questions to answer here on the podcast. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you.
We also just recorded a whole episode about postpartum recovery and the inner work of postpartum preparation. So if you're listening to this, be sure to check out our last episode. It will be the episode that was just before this. For our Q&A today about nutrition for postpartum healing and energy, our first question is, are there postpartum superfoods that actually make a difference?
I wouldn't say that there's particular superfoods. I don't believe that there's like one food that is going to fix everything or elevate your health. And I don't really like the fact that there's this whole superfood industry where things become really expensive as well. Like, I see it as quite unnecessary, and my belief is that the best nutrition is actually quite affordable and accessible. But obviously it just takes some knowledge about what that is and how to prepare it. And I like to think of, the way that food is prepared, and also different food groups as the medicine that we need in postpartum. And, I think that there's a lot of focus on nutrient-dense foods, which, we do really need as mothers, but there's also a time and a place. And if we're eating a lot of nutrient-dense foods at the wrong time, it can actually set us back. And I'm sure I think I'll get to speak to that more in the other questions. But some things I consider superfoods are generally like warming in nature, slow cooked foods. Seasonal foods are really important because they usually have the most vitality and vibrancy, and also our body is better at receiving things when it's in season. I think that like broths and meat stocks are some of the most accessible superfoods that we have to us, because they are affordable and they're made from like offcuts. And also slow cooked meats, again, like the cuts that aren't like the prized expensive parts, they're like the more budget friendly. And then your slow cooked vegetables, in postpartum, especially looking at like root vegetables, orange coloured vegetables like carrot, sweet potato, pumpkin, and then your fruits as well, like apples, stone fruits, pears, really amazing, slow cooked with some gentle spices like cinnamon and ginger. And then fats, I think, are very important for mothers who are recovering from birth and breastfeeding. So fats like ghee, butter, coconut oil, lard, tallow, like the fats from meats. Yeah, all really amazing. I'll just come back to like the slow cooked meats, stocks and broths, because they have collagen and gelatin in them, which are so important for rebuilding our ligaments, our tendons, our tissues, and also our blood that's lost through birth. So yeah, it's quite a different perspective on the whole like superfood realm.
Yeah, I think that's, I really debated putting this question in because I had the same concern, I guess, but I think you answered it beautifully. So, yeah, that's a really good. Actually, I had one thing I wanted to go back to was you mentioned about warming foods. I was wondering if you could just, maybe for someone who doesn't know what that means, if you can just touch on that.
Absolutely. So, a warming food is something that is served warm. So, yeah, whether that's a soup, a stew, a curry, a dal, some stewed fruits or apple crumble. We really want to be focusing on cooked foods in postpartum because cooked foods are somewhat pre-digested, and in Ayurveda and the Chinese medicine perspective, they are like easier for us to digest. And easy to digest is a huge focus in postpartum healing when it comes to food. But we can also increase the warming nature of our foods using warm spices like ginger, cinnamon, black pepper, cardamom, cumin. There's a whole range out there. And yeah, the more you learn, the more you see that different foods and herbs and spices have different qualities, like either warming or cooling. And so we don't have to like overdo it and only eat the most warming spices. They are quite powerful in their own right, but so a little bit goes a long way. And if you're having like cinnamon spiced stewed fruits once a day, then yeah, you don't need to keep adding like the warming spices to everything. But ultimately, yeah, those warming spices are what increases that warming nature of food.
Which is thought to be helpful for postpartum recovery.
Yeah, so I mean, to be really specific, the digestion is weakened in postpartum, and the digestive force or energy, or what's known as the fire in Ayurveda, is very low. So if you can imagine, it's gone from like a burning wood fire to like a tea light candle. And
Okay.
our job in postpartum healing is to kindle that fire, to add things that are going to strengthen that fire. And it's the warming foods and spices that do that. And if we're eating something like a cold salad or a raw vegetable juice, we're actually dampening that fire. And yeah, we don't want that because it's that digestive fire that transforms food into nutrients in our blood. So we looking after that fire is just such a key part of postpartum healing.
Wow, I thank you for explaining that. I think that is a really good way to, yeah, just understand a little bit more about what's really going on in the body and postpartum. And we talked a bit more about kind of the goings on of postpartum healing in our main episode. So if that interests you, be sure to check out that episode. The next question that we had for this Q&A was, are there certain foods that I should avoid for postpartum healing? I guess we kind of slightly touched on this already, but
Yeah, we can totally talk more about it. I think the main things to avoid in postpartum are, cold, raw foods. So anything that's straight out of the fridge that hasn't been heated up, or raw vegetables, raw fruits, raw juices, even things like bliss balls and raw slices. Like, they're so yummy, and they have all of the nutrients and the good fats, and they're like the healthy treats, right? Not so good in the early days of postpartum while that digestive fire is really weak. And I guess
Is there usually, sorry, I was just gonna, in case anyone was wondering, is it because they're usually made with uncooked oats? Is that the reason? Yeah.
Yeah, like usually, uncooked nuts, dates, coconut, all of those things are very cooling in nature, when they're raw, and then when they're mixed together, it's like you're putting all of these cold natured ingredients together, and it's a lot for the digestive fire. Um, and just to add as well that cold drinks. I know in summer in Australia, everyone wants to drink water with ice. And, I get that there's that craving on a really hot day, but that's like the worst thing that you can do to your stomach. And so, having like some lovely teas. They don't have to be piping hot, but at least room temperature is going to be much more supportive.
Do you have any favorite teas for the postpartum stage?
I do. I love making a cinnamon and hibiscus brew. So I actually
Ooh.
boil the cinnamon quills, and I'll do like a few liters at a time. Boil the cinnamon quills for 10 minutes or so, and then I turn it off the heat and add a handful of hibiscus, and it just turns into this beautiful deep red color, and it's slightly sweet because of the cinnamon, slightly sour because of the hibiscus, but both of those are like classic postpartum herbs. And so I'd say that's my favorite.
That sounds so nice. I'm just curious because I really like hibiscus tea. Is there anything specific that the hibiscus is in there to help
Uh,
with?
it's actually a bit of a mystery to me because I've never seen someone break it down. But when you
Okay.
look at it cross-culturally, it's like the postpartum drink for
Oh,
many
really? That's
cultures.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So, and for me, I'm like, surely it's nourishing our blood because of that deep red color.
Yeah.
That's really what I feel. But I also feel that it is a gentle herb.
Mm.
It's not too strong. It's not too overbearing. It's not going to have side effects. Um, and just now I'm recalling that there is a connection between hibiscus and supporting the womb. But again, I can't remember where I read that.
It's okay. Sorry, I kind of threw that one at you, but I live in the Caribbean, so hibiscus is very abundant here. So it was just, yeah, curious. Our last question for today is, I understand the value of certain foods at certain moments, but is it wrong to follow cravings also?
So this is a tricky one. And like, as someone who's recovered from disordered eating, I'm aware of how negative it can be to be strict. So I try to like, still have balance within my practice and what I'm advising to new mothers. I think it's just so important to be mindful. And, if you're craving like iced water soon after giving birth, it would be very wise not to give into that craving. If you're craving something like ice cream as well, I think it's really great to honor the craving somewhat, but see if it can be adapted to postpartum. So with ice cream, for example, if I have a mother who's like, I just want to have a big bowl of ice cream, then I'll actually make her some custard, which is warm and it has
Mm.
cinnamon in it and it's creamy. Worst case scenario is that she has the ice cream served with something warm, like an apple crumble, and then the ice cream isn't completely icy when she's eating it. And, say like someone's craving a packet of chips, like the chips on a sensitive digestion are going to be, I guess, quite dehydrating and also just taxing on that digestive fire. And so really it's just about weighing up like what is the impact going to be of me following this craving? Because do I want to set myself back? Do I want to have like constipation tomorrow? And constipation in postpartum is something we want to avoid because of the strain on the pelvic floor. So I think, with awareness and understanding about how these foods interact in our body, we can then, make conscious decisions with our cravings as well, because I don't ever want women to feel like they're too restricted, because I know that can be very triggering. But I think it's just so important to understand, what's happening in our body and why we need to really care for it. I think it's really important to remember that the first 6 weeks of postpartum actually goes by very quickly. And once you're out of that and you have your digestion is strong, you can start being more fluid and free with your eating.
So you mentioned the first 6 weeks. Is that kind of the time frame where you recommend being on this kind of modified, like very, warming foods, cooked foods, postpartum diet?
Yeah, I do. And there are actually phases within that first 6 weeks. So the first week or two is you're really focusing on the soft, fluidy foods. Hydrating foods like soups and stews and that sort of thing, and congee. And you're not going to overboard on the proteins or anything complex and heavy like lasagna, anything that's going to really potentially be too much for that small little candle flame. And then the digestion will start to strengthen, and that's where mothers can start to add in more variety and have, I guess, more solid foods rather than just really soupy kind of foods. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, which is a part of the education that I do. But yeah, generally speaking, it's probably at least the first 4 to 5 weeks before the digestion really is ready for that even bigger variety of food.
That's great to know. Thank you so much. And that was the last question that we had for our Q&A today. Thank you for answering all our questions today and for being here on the Postpartum Prep podcast in general. It's been so great to have you. And I really hope anyone who's listening to this episode, if you haven't already listened to our full episode, I think you really would love it. I said I was buzzing after we finished recording that episode because it was just I think a really amazing conversation and really helpful to understand a bit deeper about why postpartum healing matters and why rest is so important for postpartum healing. We also talked about how to gather a support system to support you during postpartum, and we talked about boundaries and navigating difficult relationships with mothers and mother-in-laws and how to handle those situations. Thank you again, Carla, so much for listening today, for joining us today. For those of you who are listening today, please be sure if you're new here that you follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you want to submit a question for a future Q&A episode, I always share our upcoming Q&A topics in my email newsletter, so you can subscribe to the email newsletter by downloading my free postpartum prep checklist. And I will also be able to update you via email then about all our future episodes. And please share this podcast if you know anybody who would benefit from listening to this episode. You could even share this episode with someone in your postpartum support system so they can also learn about how to best support you with meals after birth. And otherwise, we'll see you in our original episode that Carla and I had recorded. It will be the episode just before this one. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.